Why has the London premium market fallen so much? A few questions I've had following the recent market update I did about London West 1. I will be doing more, although I have had a quick look around and quite a lot of the higher end postcodes have suffered the same fate. But why has that happened? Well, to understand this, we need to go back to 2008, really, because prior to 2008, whenever property prices fell, recoveries were always led by first-time buyers. When the markets were right, income was right, the economy was doing well, mortgages were available, etc., and there were incentives, young people would begin to buy, one-bedroom flats, two up, two downs, etc., which would push those prices up, which in turn would push up the prices of the semis, which in turn would push up the prices of the detached homes, and so on and so forth. A rising property market from the bottom up, reticulating upwards and outwards, normally from London. But 2008 was different. It was not a bottom up recovery, it was a top down recovery for the following reasons. When the crash happened in 2008, it caused many of these high-end developers who were building these vast pyramid schemes, investments throughout London for overseas investors. It caught them with their pants down and they didn't like it. And following that, the government at the time, especially once Cameron got into power, encouraged these people to throw their money at this high-end side of London because it was billions of pounds of unsold property sat there. And once the money started to pour in from countries that we won't mention now because we're not the best of friends at the moment, then this property began to rise, and that buoyancy filtered downwards, pulling the next level up, which pulled the next level up, and so on and so forth. However, in their wisdom, what the government then did, once that market had all recovered, they stiffened up the anti-money laundering laws. And then Mr. HMRC began to visit these people and demand evidence as to how the funds they bought the property with were acquired, and if they could prove it. And if they could not prove that the funds used to buy these properties came from a legal source, they would seize their property, they would seize their bank accounts, and they would give them a certain amount of time to provide evidence, or they would keep the lot, which they did. They have seized billions. On top of this, in his wisdom, George Osborne then reformed, I like that word, reformed, the stamp duty fees, making the top rate for properties over 1.5 million 12%, plus an additional 3% if it is not your primary residence, plus an additional 2% if you are an overseas investor. That basically brought the London prime market to a halt. It stopped rising, and in fact it is worth no more today than it was in 2016, and that's not taking inflation into account either. So it had a really damaging effect. And the irony is that on an annual basis, the Treasury collects less stamp duty from the prime market now than it did before 2014. So that was clever, wasn't it? On top of this, what actually happened then is that they have then brought in Section 24, all these reforms to buy to let, and they have tempered the investment into London, which is quite sad because we are the first port of call for investment around the world, believe it or not. But there are ways and means. For example, over 100,000 properties in London are owned by overseas investors. There are over 50,000 empty properties. Now, that is not right. We should be encouraging overseas investment, but not to the detriment of local families who need somewhere to live. But what are the options? Well, they will tell you there are no options, but if we take a look at Australia, they welcome overseas investment. However, if you invest in property in Australia as an overseas investor, you must generate more residential units than you are buying. In other words, you must develop, not just park your filthy money in bricks and mortar in somebody else's country to keep it safe. And this goes back years. For many of you who know London, the Bishop's Avenue was basically all bought out by Middle Eastern investors back in the 80s. We have had successive governments since then. So there's no point any of you sitting there and saying if it were the other lot, it would be different. They're all as bad as each other. But if any government had the wisdom to use tax incentives to direct that money towards developing property, building property throughout the country with greater incentive for areas in greater need, it wouldn't cost the government a penny to build hundreds of thousands of homes that could be used as starter homes, social housing, low-cost housing, build to rent, build to buy, discounted home, whatever the case may be. In fact, the government would actually generate itself lots of revenue from all of the spin-offs from all of this construction, and yet they don't. And if they don't, you have to ask yourself, why don't they? Why are they intent on preventing, or rather discouraging, people from renovating the beautiful homes that are sat there falling apart? And why are they so in favour of these big companies that are just building on land that they don't need to and passing off plastic palaces without the room to swing a cat in, rather than encourage all of the small developers who would love to make a small profit with a labour of love, renovating a property and bringing it back to the market for use, for rental, for a family, for an individual, whoever. But yes, the London prime market has been hindered ever since, and now with the cutting down of the capital gains tax allowance, even the small renovations will grind to a halt because they've literally taken the profit out of them. I hope that helps. I will be back with more postcode market updates soon. And in the meantime, bye-bye for now, and I'll see you in the next video.